Hi, my name's Hanbyul and I use the pronouns she and her. I live with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, or CMT for short. The specific one that I have affects the gene MNF2 and it falls under CMT type 2. So CMT is a hereditary disorder, meaning I was born with it. It's a neuromuscular one. So my nerves and my muscles are affected. Over time, my muscles deteriorate because they're not being properly told by my nerves on how to operate. So if you're to take a look at my forearms, for example, they're quite skinny due to muscle loss and I have curled fingers. If you were to see my legs, it's the same way. I also wear leg braces. They correct my posture and it really protects me from sprains, fractures, and broken bones. I've had them since the age like 3 and they serve me really well. Before in the past they'd help me walk, but by the time I got to be around age 20, I lost the ability to walk. It happened very gradually. Hence, I got a electric mobility scooter, and I use that to go around and take me to places. People with mobility issues use all kinds of medical devices, whether it might be a cane, a power chair, or a manual wheelchair. For me, I use a electric mobility scooter because it's physically hard for me to push myself using a manual wheelchair. And I love my scooter too. In regards to my physical disability affecting my mental health, I would say that sometimes it can produce anxiety for me. I live in a world that's not built necessarily for people with physical disabilities, meaning that not all places are accessible. So if I were to travel abroad, which I love doing, I heavily research the accessibility in that country. I also check the airline policies too and whether the airplanes even accommodate people like me who use a mobility scooter. And I go over things like, how do they take apart my scooter? How do they store my scooter? Will my scooter be okay? Things like that. Luckily, I live here in California, which is accessible for the most part, but there are times when I will look up something like, is this restaurant big enough? Does it have steps? And these thoughts that I have to have, they really can morph into worries and concerns. But ultimately, I don't try to let it affect my life too much. I love doing all kinds of activities like yoga, exploring different cities and cuisines, and clubbing from time to time and dancing. And I have to admit that you don't see people like me very much on an everyday basis. I'm fairly young and I'm disabled. So to see someone like me in a mobility scooter, I admit that it can be sort of a sight to see. And there's just a lot of negative stereotypes surrounding disability, a lot of stigma. But I would encourage people to make friends with people with disabilities, get to know them, because you'll see that behind the disability, there is a person. And there are things that I do differently. For example, with my fingers, it's kind of hard for me to type, so I'll use my knuckles instead. So that's something that I had to adapt to, but ultimately I'm not different from everyone else, and truly I'm not that unique. I feel like there's so much shame surrounding disability, and it's often depicted as such a bad thing. But for me, my disability is a huge source of pride. It deepens the connections that I have, it encourages me to practice compassion, and it really highlights for me human endurance, adaptivity, and creativity. So I would say just get to know people with all kinds of disabilities. I think it can be truly eye-opening. And I'm so thankful to be able to share my story with Made of Millions and with Diversability. I encourage you to check them both out.